Why do humans leak from their eyes when they are not wounded? And what ancient pain could possibly require the most powerful healers in the colony? Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the observation window of the xenobiology lab, watching the binary sunset paint the sky of Keeper's Rest in shades of amber and violet, and felt the familiar burning sensation building behind her eyes. Not here, she told herself firmly, blinking rapidly. Not in front of them. But grief doesn't follow schedules or care about interspecies diplomacy. And today marked exactly 1 standard year since her mother's passing. Sarah had promised herself she would get through her shift without breaking down, would maintain the professional composure expected of humanity's first long-term researcher on a Keeper world. But the message she had received that morning, a delayed transmission containing her mother's final recorded birthday wishes for her, had cracked something fundamental inside her chest. She took a shaky breath and turned back to her workstation, where 3 Keeper cubs, Nira, Tosik, and Little Ven, were supposed to be cataloging mineral samples from the northern canyons. Instead, all 3 were staring at her with their large, luminescent eyes, their delicate, pointed ears twitching with concern, their small faces showing that universal expression of worry that transcended species. Sarah forced a smile. "I'm fine, little ones. Please continue with your work." Her voice only cracked slightly on the last word. Nira, the eldest at what would be equivalent to a human 7-year-old, tilted her head in that particular way Keepers did when they were analyzing a problem. "Dr. Sarah, your eyes are producing fluid. Are you experiencing optical malfunction?" Sarah bit her lip, which was exactly the wrong thing to do because it made the tears she had been fighting spill over, 2 hot trails down her cheeks that she quickly wiped away. No malfunction. Humans just. Sometimes our eyes do this." Tosik stood up so quickly his stool clattered backward. "You are leaking. This is a symptom of internal damage." The young Keeper's voice pitched high with panic, and Sarah realized with growing horror that she had never actually cried in front of any of the Keepers during her year-long stay. "Why would I have?" she thought desperately. "They don't cry. They don't have tears at all. They have no frame of reference for this." "I promise you, I'm not damaged," Sarah said, kneeling down to the cub's level, trying to project calm even as another tear escaped. "This is normal for humans." But Ven, the youngest and most empathic of the 3, was already keening. A high-pitched sound of distress that Sarah had only heard once before, when one of the cubs had broken their arm. "She is in pain. Look how she tries to hide it. She is being brave." The little Keeper rushed forward and grabbed Sarah's hand with both of her small, 4-fingered ones. "We will get help, Doctor. Sarah, the elders will fix you." Before Sarah could stop them, all 3 cubs were at the communication panel, their small hands flying over the controls with surprising coordination. "No, wait, please don't," Sarah started, but Nira was already speaking rapidly in the melodic Keeper language, her words tumbling over each other in panic. Sarah caught enough of it to understand. Human, leaking, eye damage, internal pain, hiding suffering, emergency. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, her grief momentarily forgotten in the face of the diplomatic incident she was about to cause. The cubs clustered around her, Ven still holding her hand. Tosik, gently trying to examine her face without touching the damaged areas. And Nira standing guard as if she could fight off whatever was hurting their beloved human teacher. Despite everything, Sarah felt a warmth bloom in her chest at their concern, which only made her cry harder because she missed being cared for like this. Missed her mother's fierce protectiveness. Missed being someone's person to worry about. The lab doors burst open less than 3 minutes later, which meant whoever was coming had literally run through the colony's winding corridors. Jadarera, the master healer and one of the most respected elders in the colony, swept in with her emergency medical kit, her silver hair streaming behind her like a banner, her pointed ears rigid with focus. Right behind her came Lycia, the young cultural liaison officer who had been Sarah's primary contact and over the past year, had become something close to a friend. Lycia was stunning, even by Keeper standards, with platinum hair that caught the light like spun starlight, as the color of twilight skies, and a face that would make any human artist weep with joy at its delicate beauty. She wore her typical working outfit, fitted tactical pants in deep blue, a sleek white top with the colony's emblem, and a utility vest that somehow looked more like a fashion statement than functional gear. But it was her expression that caught Sarah's attention now, pure undiluted worry mixed with confusion, as she took in the scene. "Sarah." Lycia crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, dropping to her knees beside the human. The cubs said you were critically injured, that you were leaking and in terrible pain, but trying to hide it to protect them from worry. Her hands hovered over Sarah, clearly wanting to help but not knowing where the injury was. What happened? Did something explode? Were you exposed to toxins? Why didn't you call for help immediately? Jadorera was already scanning Sarah with a handheld device, her ancient eyes narrowed in concentration, her healer's instincts clearly telling her that something didn't add up. I'm reading no internal damage, no external wounds, no toxin exposure, no organ failure, no neural degradation, she said slowly, her gaze moving from her scanner to Sarah's tear-stained face. But you are producing significant amounts of ocular fluid, and your respiration is irregular, which in keepers would indicate severe distress from physical trauma. Sarah looked around at the circle of concerned faces. From the 3 terrified cubs to Lycia's intense worry, to Jadorera's professional confusion. And she didn't know whether to laugh or cry harder. I'm not hurt, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. Not physically. Humans. We produce tears for emotional reasons too, not just physical ones. The silence that followed was profound. Tosic broke it first. Emotional? Reasons? His small voice was bewildered. But why would emotions damage your eyes? They don't damage them, Sarah tried to explain, accepting the cloth that Lycia silently offered her and wiping her face. Tears are. They're how humans release strong feelings sometimes. Sadness, grief, even joy or relief. It's a normal biological response. Jadorera sat back on her heels, her expression shifting from concern to fascination. Remarkable. In all my years studying xenobiology, I never. Keepers do not have this function. We process emotional distress through other means, pheromone release primarily, but never fluid production. To us, tears only indicate physical malfunction. Lycia's hand found Sarah's shoulder, her touch gentle but grounding. What strong feeling is causing this? She asked softly, and there was something in her voice, a tenderness, that made Sarah's heart skip slightly. Over the past year, she had noticed the way Lycia always seemed to be nearby when Sarah needed help. The way their conversations lasted long into the station's night cycles. The way Lycia's eyes tracked her across rooms during colony gatherings. Sarah had told herself she was imagining it, that interspecies friendship was already complicated enough without adding other feelings into the mix. But the way Lycia was looking at her now, with such open concern and something deeper swimming in those twilight eyes, made it impossible to ignore. Today is the anniversary of my mother's death, Sarah said quietly, and saying it out loud made it real all over again, made the tears come faster. I received a message she recorded before she passed, and I miss her so much. She expected more confusion, perhaps clinical questions about human grief processes. But what she got instead was Nira climbing into her lap and wrapping small arms around her neck. Oh, doctor. Sarah, the cub whispered. You are experiencing kinship mourning. We understand this pain. We just did not know humans leak during it. Then Tosic was hugging her from one side and Ven from the other. And Sarah found herself at the center of a pile of compassionate young keepers, all of them making soft humming sounds that she had learned was their equivalent of comforting someone. Jadorera stood, but her expression had softened considerably. Loss of a parent bond is a profound grief, she said, her ancient voice carrying the weight of personal understanding. Among keepers, we gather in mourning circles and share memories while releasing grief pheromones that the community absorbs and processes together. You have been processing this alone, haven't you, doctor? Sarah? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The truth was, she had been isolated in her grief. The only human on a world of aliens who expressed emotion so differently from her, unable to explain why she needed to be alone some days, why certain memories would make her withdraw. That ends now, Lycia said firmly, and when Sarah looked up, she saw determination written across that beautiful face. If humans release grief through tears and need companionship through loss, then that is what you will have. Tell us about your mother, Sarah. Let us help you carry this. And so, surrounded by curious cubs and caring aliens in a laboratory on a world 17 light years from Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen did something she hadn't been able to do since arriving on Keeper's Rest. She talked about her mother. She told them about Anna Chen's terrible jokes and her brilliant mind, about Sunday morning pancakes and late-night conversations about the stars, about the woman who had encouraged her daughter to reach for alien worlds, even knowing she might never see her again. The tears kept coming, but somehow they felt different now, less like drowning and more like release. Lycia stayed close throughout, her presence a steady anchor, occasionally asking gentle questions that showed she was truly listening, truly trying to understand this very human way of grieving. Jadarera sat with them too, offering insights from her own long life about loss and memory. And the cubs eventually grew quiet, still cuddled close, but peaceful, now that they understood their beloved teacher was not dying, just hurting in a way they could finally comprehend. As the second sun dipped below the horizon and the lab filled with the soft bioluminescent glow of Keeper's Rest's evening lights, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there, would probably always be there in some form, but it felt less like a wound she had to hide and more like a scar she could acknowledge. "Thank you," she said, looking at each of them in turn, letting her gaze linger on Lycia. "On Earth, we have a saying, grief shared is grief diminished. I didn't realize how much I needed this until now." Lycia smiled, and it was like watching a star being born. "On Keeper's Rest, we say, no one should weather a storm alone, when there are those willing to stand in the rain with them." Her hand found Sarah's again, and this time, when their fingers intertwined, it felt less like comfort and more like a promise. "I should have told you sooner about why I was struggling sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I just didn't know how to explain human crying without it seeming strange or weak." "Weak?" Jadara's eyebrows rose. "Doctor, Sarah, you have been carrying profound grief while maintaining your duties, advancing your research, and caring for our cubs with patience and kindness. You have been shouldering a burden that among keepers would be distributed across an entire kinship group. That is not weakness. That is extraordinary strength." Nira looked up from Sarah's lap, her young face serious. "Doctor, Sarah, if humans leak when they are sad, does this mean you will leak again?" Sarah couldn't help but laugh, even though her eyes were still wet. "Probably, yes. Humans cry fairly regularly when we experience strong emotions. Then we will know better next time," Tosic declared. "We will not panic and summon all the healers. Perhaps just summon friends instead," Ven suggested quietly, and the simple wisdom in the young cub's words made Sarah's heart swell. "Just friends," Sarah agreed, looking at Lycia as she said it, watching the way the keeper's expression softened, the way understanding and something warmer passed between them without words. Jadarera began packing up her unused medical equipment, but before she left, she paused by Sarah's chair. "I would like to add human grief responses to our xenological database, with your permission," she said. "If more humans come to Keeper's Rest in the future, it would benefit everyone to understand this aspect of your emotional expression. You should not have had to face this misunderstanding alone." Sarah nodded. "I'll write up a comprehensive guide on human tears and emotional responses. It might prevent future emergency healer summons." "A worthy goal," Jadarera said, with what might have been a smile. "Though I must say, in my 3 centuries as a healer, this is the first time I have responded to an emergency that required emotional support rather than medical intervention." It was not an unwelcome change after the elder healer departed and the cubs were finally coaxed back to their dormitory with promises that Dr. Sarah was truly fine and would see them in the morning. Lycia and Sarah found themselves alone in the lab. The binary moons were rising outside the observation window, bathing everything in silver and pale blue light. "You don't have to stay," Sarah said softly, though she desperately hoped Lycia would. "I do actually," Lycia replied, moving to stand beside Sarah at the window. "Because there is something I have been wanting to tell you for several months now. And seeing you in pain today made me realize that waiting for the perfect moment is foolish when the right moment is simply when the truth needs to be spoken." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. "What truth?" Lycia turned to face her fully, and the moonlight caught in her platinum hair, made her luminescent skin glow like she was lit from within. But it was the vulnerability in her eyes that took Sarah's breath away. "Among keepers, we do not have the same romantic structures as humans. I have learned this from studying your culture. But we do have what we call soul recognition, when you meet someone and your fundamental self recognizes something essential in them, a complementary spirit. Sarah, my soul recognized yours the day you arrived on this world. And every day since has only strengthened that recognition." Sarah felt tears building again. But these were entirely different from the grief tears that had started this whole situation. "Lycia, you do not have to respond now," Lycia said quickly. I know this is already an emotional day for you, and I do not wish to burden you with more complex feelings. I simply wanted you to know that you are not alone here. You have not been alone, not truly, because I have been beside you all along. And I will continue to be beside you for as long as you will allow it. Sarah didn't overthink it, didn't analyze the implications or worry about interspecies complications. She simply stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Lycia, feeling the keeper's initial surprise before she melted into the embrace, her arms coming up to hold Sarah with a tenderness that spoke of carefully restrained strength and deep caring. My soul recognizes yours too, Sarah whispered against Lycia's shoulder. I was just afraid to acknowledge it. They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other while the stars wheeled overhead in unfamiliar patterns. Two beings from different worlds finding unexpected connection in the vast loneliness of space. When they finally pulled back, Lycia reached up and gently wiped a remaining tear from Sarah's cheek with her thumb, her expression wondering. So these tears now, are they from sadness or something else? Sarah laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in months. Humans can cry from happiness too, from feeling so much that it has to spill over somehow. These are good tears, Lycia repeated as if committing the phrase to memory. Your species is endlessly fascinating. Sarah Chen, you leak when you are sad, leak when you are happy. And somehow this is considered normal and healthy. When you put it that way, it does sound weird, Sarah admitted with a grin. I prefer to think of it as beautiful, Lycia said softly. A physical manifestation of emotional depth, a reminder that you feel things so profoundly that your body cannot contain it all. There is poetry in that. Sarah felt her chest tighten with affection for this alien woman who saw beauty where others might see strangeness, who had stood by her through loneliness and grief without even being asked, who looked at human tears and found poetry. Will you tell me more about soul recognition? Sarah asked. How it works for keepers, what it means. Lycia's smile was radiant. I will tell you everything, but perhaps we should relocate somewhere more comfortable? The lab chairs are not designed for long conversations. They ended up in Lycia's quarters, a cozy space filled with plants from both Earth and Keeper's Rest, a small act of cultural bridge building that Sarah found deeply touching. Over warm drinks that Lycia had learned to prepare to Sarah's taste, they talked about connection and culture, about the different ways species expressed affection and commitment, about the challenges and possibilities of caring for someone whose biology and background were so different from your own. Does it concern you? Lycia asked at one point, her fingers tracing idle patterns on the cup she held. That we are so different? Sarah considered the question seriously. Sometimes, she admitted, but then I think about how the cubs today saw me crying and thought I was dying, and how that misunderstanding brought me more support and care than I knew I needed. I think about how differences can be bridges if we're willing to learn from them. Yes, we're different, but maybe that's not something to overcome. Maybe that's something to celebrate. You sound like a diplomat, Lycia teased gently. I thought you were a xenobiologist. I'm a woman who's learning that the most important discoveries aren't always in microscopes or data files, Sarah replied. Sometimes they're in quiet moments and honest conversations, and the realization that someone sees you, truly sees you, across all the differences and distances. Lycia set down her cup and reached for Sarah's hand, holding it between both of her own, marveling at the difference in their fingers, the way they fit together despite the variance. Your mother, she said carefully. Would she have approved of this? Of us? Sarah felt the familiar ache of grief, but found it was softer now, tempered by the day's catharsis and the warmth of present connection. My mother told me before I left Earth that she wanted me to find wonder among the stars, and that wonder came in many forms. She said to keep my heart open to all the universe had to offer. Sarah squeezed Lycia's hand. I think finding you would have made her happy. She always said I needed someone who could match my stubbornness with patience. Then I am honored to be that person, Lycia said, though I may also be occasionally stubborn. So we shall have to navigate that together. Together sounds perfect, Sarah replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The next morning, when Sarah arrived at the lab, she found the 3 cubs waiting for her with a carefully constructed gift, a small box woven from native grasses, filled with soft cloths. We made you a tear-catching kit, Nira explained proudly. So when you leak from emotions, you will have proper materials to manage the fluid. Our kinship groups helped us understand that grief is sacred, Tosic added, and that helping someone through it is an honor. So if you need to cry more, we will sit with you. Then simply held up a drawing she had made, a crude but recognizable image of Sarah surrounded by keeper cubs and one taller figure with platinum hair that was obviously Lycia. Everyone holding hands. You are part of our kinship now, the young keeper said simply. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again, but she smiled through them. Thank you, little ones. This means more to me than you know. Are those happy tears or sad tears? Nira asked, peering at her intently. Very happy tears, Sarah confirmed. Good, Nira declared. Those are our favorite kind. As the cubs settled into their lessons and the day's work began, Sarah caught sight of Lycia passing by the lab window, clearly on her way to her own duties. The keeper paused, met Sarah's eyes through the glass, and smiled with such warmth and promise that Sarah felt her heart lift like a bird taking flight. She touched her fingers to the window in a small wave, and Lycia mirrored the gesture before continuing on her way. There would be more tears, Sarah knew. Both sad ones and happy ones, because that was part of being human. Part of feeling deeply in a universe that was beautiful and terrible and full of loss and love in equal measure. But now she understood that she didn't have to hide them, didn't have to bear her emotions in isolation. The cubs had given her permission to grieve openly. Lycia had offered her a connection that transcended species, and Keeper's Rest had become not just a research posting, but something approaching home. Her mother had wanted her to find wonder among the stars, and Sarah had found something even better. She had found belonging, acceptance, and the beginning of love in the most unexpected of places. And if that made her leak from her eyes occasionally, well, at least now everyone understood why.